Hello, beautiful soul, and welcome to another exciting episode of Howling at the Moon with the Canine Guides. I am Heather Leigh Strom, your host and your channel. And today I thought it would take the opportunity to share with you about my book, Canine Spirit Guides, because it's no ordinary book. Just like I'm sure you've realized that the Canine Spirit Guides are no ordinary guides, right? Through this episode, I'm going to take you on a journey, one that begins with a fascinating and unexpected spiritual awakening. The timing of it all was so meticulous that it was very clear that this awakening had been carefully orchestrated. And of course, I'm talking about my spiritual awakening, because that's what this book is really about, how the Canine Spirit Guides assisted in my spiritual awakening. And here's the surprising part. I never actually set out to write a book. In fact, I never really thought I could write a book. And I really didn't have any desire to. But when I met with my mentor for the very first time, he did a psychic reading on me that completely shifted my direction and my focus. In that reading, he told me that I was meant to write a book. There was nothing that was forcing me to write a book, but he was simply revealing the fact that this was part of the plan, part of the blueprint that I had chosen. And yet, on some level, this information was not exactly a vague nudge, because he also indicated that it needed to be completed by the end of the year, and that was in 2022. So I received that reading in February of 2022, and lo and behold, the book was completed at the end of September of the same year. However, during that reading, when I learned this critical information about myself, I wasn't given any guidance as to what this book was supposed to be about. And as you can imagine, I was a little bit perplexed. At the time, I was focused on my career as a physical therapist, a medical massage therapist, and a functional medicine practitioner. I couldn't imagine any of that making a good topic for a book. I also had an extensive history as an athlete in cycling, mountain biking, triathlons. And while I'd had a lifelong connection with dogs, I'd recently stepped away from that world following the sudden loss of my very best dog, Tori. The pain was just too great, and I separated from that part of myself 11 years ago. So as I considered what I might write about, who would want to read about these aspects of my life? I had stories about chronic illness, exercise and competition, overcoming hardships, many, many hardships. But none of these felt like the real answer. I was stumped. For weeks, I tried to free write, just write whatever came to my mind. I mean, I had a wealth of knowledge and personal experience to draw from, but nothing felt compelling or felt right. And what I came up with felt really forced, like it would be too much effort. It would take a lot of willpower to put it on paper. And that wasn't exactly congruent with something that I imagined coming from your soul, from your blueprint. Dogs had always been a cornerstone of my life for as long as I could remember. And to give you a sense of just how deep this connection was, I've had over 30 personal dogs in my life so far. I started training dogs when I was 12 years old, drawing up contracts, doing board and train at my house. This was back in the late 70s. I also began competing in AKC obedience at that time of my life with two of my German Shepherd dogs and got my first taste of training for Schutzhund, a German police dog sport. Now, fast forward to my 30s, and it's like I picked up right where I left off in my childhood without even skipping a beat. I became a professional dog trainer, kind of by accident, competing at the national level in Schutzhund, the international level in French Ring, and the regional level in AKC events. I also bred Belgian Malinois for 10 years. I had a lot of stories around these dogs in my life to share, and they weren't necessarily about training and competition. They were also very deeply emotional, filled with moments of connection, heartbreak, and inspiration. And as I started reflecting on these incredible dogs, I also realized they had shaped my life in profound ways. So I began jotting down everything I could remember because this felt like a sustainable project. This felt like soul frequency. And then one night, about 6 weeks into this process, I had a dream, but it wasn't really a dream. It was one of those experiences where you're in dream state, but it's kind of like an out of body experience. It's like a journey. It's like you are in a different place outside of being human. It was more like an intergalactic council meeting, like I was meeting with my spirit guide team. And we were having a very important conversation about this book. And I remember 3 words being repeatedly put on the table. And without even waking up, I reached over next to me to the bedside table where I kept my journal. Without ever opening my eyes, I wrote down these 3 words, put the journal away, and went back to sleep. I went back to the dream and we continued our discussion. The next day I woke up, I vaguely remember that something happened last night and that maybe I wrote it down. So I opened my journal and there were 3 words written repeatedly on this one page. And they were Canine Spirit Guides. And it's important to mention that the word canine is always spelled with a letter K and a number 9. This is for a specific frequency match. So as you see in the book, it's always spelled Canine Spirit Guides, letter K, number 9. So with this new information, I was really excited because now I had permission to move forward on what my intuition was telling me was the correct direction. And this would be an easy book to write, or so I thought. What I couldn't really foresee was that this was not going to be any ordinary memoir. These stories about the dogs that shaped my life and the pivotal events intertwined within them were actually meant to serve as a catalyst for profound spiritual healing and awakening. I had no idea the depth of transformation that was before me. But after I wrote the book and I reflected back, I realized I had actually received a sign indicating that this was coming. Back in the 2020 lockdown, I was walking in the yard with my dog and we stumbled upon a very specific, meaningful message or symbol, if you will. And that was a conjoined squirrel lying in the grass. Now, when I say conjoined, I mean Siamese twin. The squirrel was joined at the back. And part of it was dead and part of it was alive. And that in and of itself had a specific meaning, which is all in the book. I won't go into it here. But when I laid eyes on the squirrel, I felt this massive energy wash just wash over me, a frequency, and it made every hair on my body stand on end. And it was like this very powerful electricity that just washed through me. And somehow I understood that something big was coming, that something in my life was about to change, something profound was about to change for me. And it left me feeling a little bit sad and unsure of what was coming. So that experience really made an impression on me. Yet I had no idea what it meant logically, spiritually, emotionally, energetically. I had received the message, the call to arms, that it was time. It was time to activate my blueprint that I came here to do. So it took me a couple of years, but I started searching for people to help me through this major shift that was about to happen. Unconsciously, that's what I was doing. I didn't realize it, but I was searching for professionals that could lead me on this journey. I found a psychic shaman to mentor me through this process. I found a numerologist, an astrologer, and I also worked with a regressive hypnotherapist to help guide me through whatever was coming. I knew that I needed to prepare. What I didn't realize at that time was that I was going to be writing this book. And what I also didn't realize was that this book would set the entire process that I had felt coming in motion. What's also interesting is that even though this book had unconventional origins and composition, it's gone on to win several prizes, several awards, even though it has been judged against traditionally written titles. So we've received an award from the New York City Big Book Award in the spirituality category, from the Independent Publisher Book Awards in a regional ebook, also the National Indie Excellence Awards in the New Age category, and in the Independent Press Awards under the Animals and Pets category. So it's really speaking to a lot of different audiences, really, when you think about it, which is pretty exciting. And these accolades are really extraordinary, especially considering how this book came to life. It wasn't planned in the traditional way, no topic brainstorming, structural outlines, or character development process. And actually, when I began writing this book, I had no idea what this book was going to be about. So it was really extraordinary to be acknowledged for the quality of the manuscript. But let's talk about the process a little bit more. The only thing I knew at this point, at the beginning, was that this book was going to focus on my dogs, not all of them, not all 30 of them, just 10. And it was my intuition, my guidance, maybe even the canine spirit guides at that point, that were revealing which of these dogs were to be included in this first book. And as I started putting words to paper, I discovered these 10 dogs weren't 10 separate beings. They were, in fact, reincarnations of each other, forming what was to be known as the Core 4 grouping. This revelation kind of changed my perspective, to say the least. Realizing that these 10 dogs were really only 4 dogs that had reincarnated several times, twice, if not 3 times. And one thing that I want to emphasize is that the writing process for this book and the order of this book does not follow a linear timeline. Instead, it was guided. So the order of the dogs in the book would jump across time and events as directed by the canine spirit guides. So I started out with Tori in my 30s, jumped to Sally when I was 4 years old, and then back to Trixie when I was 12. And this sequence was significant, although I didn't understand why at the time. I just knew it had to be in that order. With each dog, I wrote down everything I could remember. Tori's story when I was 30 was pretty easy, and it was also very raw and emotional because it was pretty recent. Then I reflected on Sally from when I was 4 years old, and as I wrote what little I could remember about her, these words unearthed very painful memories I had suppressed for decades. There was a lot of family stuff that came up I didn't realize, or I didn't remember at the time. And I was shown connections between Sally and Tori, and I realized they were the same soul in different lifetimes. And this insight hit me like a wave of revelation, bringing clarity about my childhood wounds I had never really understood before. When I moved on to Trixie, from when I was 12, the same process unfolded. Memories surfaced, messages became clear, and deeply buried pain was revealed. I meditated with each memory, asking questions such as, what's the message here? What do I need to learn? Or what do I need to release from this emotion? And the answers came in my meditation, not through words, not through thoughts, but through profound energetic shifts. During these meditations, I would experience intense physical release, shaking, uncontrolled trembling, and forceful exhalations that emptied my lungs completely and so forcefully that my eyelids would turn inside out. Have you ever had that happen? That's a pretty forceful exhale. Tears would stream down my face, and I wasn't even crying. And I would be sweating all over as if I was running a marathon. I just went with this process. I allowed it. I embraced it because I could really feel that there was a massive energetic shift happening. After these purging episodes, I felt lighter, clearer, and much more at peace. My husband would take one look at me when I'd come out of my meditation room and say, "What were you doing in there? You look like you just ran a race." So it was pretty obvious that some major things were happening. But I completed the first 3 dogs and I moved on to Zozo, a Belgian Malinois I had in my 30s. And this is where things got a little more intense, if they weren't intense already. During a meditation I was using to try and connect to Zozo and get his message, I saw him sitting in front of me and he was talking to me. His mouth was moving, but I couldn't hear anything. I kept asking him to speak louder, turn up the volume, I can't hear you. And nothing would happen. And after about 30 minutes, I got frustrated. I started to get angry, doubtful of myself. And so I texted my mentor, venting about how nothing was working. You know, that 3-year-old. His response was cryptic. "What's the energy?" he said. "What do you mean?" I thought. "I have no idea what you mean. What do you mean, what's the energy?" And as I stood in my kitchen reading his text, another wave of energy washed over me. And suddenly, I had a flashback to my childhood with my German Shepherd dog, Nick, by my side. I was 12 years old, frozen in fear, as my father yelled, belittled me, tried to make me feel small and insignificant, which he was succeeding in. I couldn't respond at this age. I felt helpless. And this anger, this helplessness over time evolved into deep anger and rage even. And at this moment where this memory came through, I suddenly understood, I got it, that Zozo and Nick were the same dog. And as this realization came through, another purging episode began, even more powerful than anything else I had experienced. A lot of breath work was coming through, and I had never done breath work in my life, but it was being done for me. My body just knew how to do it, and it took care of business. And at the end of it, I could see my light radiating up into the cosmos. It was so bright, so brilliant, so huge, and I had never seen anything like that before. I was getting the distinct impression that this book and this process was far bigger than I had ever foreseen. And just like that, I could suddenly hear Zozo. My channel had opened much wider than it had ever been in the past. And communication became so much clearer. Ironically, this was something that was predicted from the astrologer. When I looked back at her report, at the timeline she gave me, it was the time that she said, it will suddenly get easier for you. It will be like something you've been doing your whole life. And that's exactly what happened. Now, through this process, I realized the canine spirit guides were working with me from the very beginning. While I wrote about Tori, Sally, and Trixie, Anthea, one of the guides that worked with these 3 dogs, was working with me energetically, pulling the strings, providing me with the frequency to heal these parts of myself that were wounded, even if I didn't realize it. When I wrote about Nick and Zozo, Oscar, who was another canine spirit guide, was doing the same. And that's what I experienced through what I just described with Zozo. At the time, I didn't even know these canine spirit guides existed. I still thought I was working just with my personal dogs. But I could feel the massive energy shifts and spiritual awakenings they facilitated. Then a pivotal moment happened. And it was during a meditation that Apache, one of the dogs in the 3rd group, appeared to me. And in this meditation, she transformed instantly and seamlessly into a black panther right before my eyes. And yes, I did have some vision, I realized, looking back, which was really exciting. But this was my first clue that the core 4 were coordinating with wild animals. This was interesting. The plot was thickening, right? When I shared this with my shaman mentor, he confirmed my revelation. He could confirm that with the canine spirit guides. He had some limited access to them. They wouldn't tell him everything, but they would tell him enough to mentor me through this process. They preferred to communicate only with me. So they were working with him to get me up on board with my abilities. But he was able to confirm, yes, they are cooperating with the shamanic animals. But he also said that this type of partnership is highly unusual. But soon after that, I was given even more clarity on this in a meditation. So in this meditation, 4 dogs appeared in front of me: Apache, Nick, Tori, and my current dog, Gigi. And next to each of these was their chosen shamanic animal. Apache had her black panther, Nick had a lion, Tori had a cheetah, and Gigi had a bald eagle, which explains a lot about Gigi's character. And here's the picture that I drew. After I came out of the meditation, I drew a picture so that I could remember this event. So here's the picture I drew. Pardon my lack of skill, but that's not why I'm here. So at this time, they also identified themselves as the core four. This is what they wanted to be referred to. And I wasn't sure what this meant at the time, but I said, okay. And so I wrote it down, made note of it. And it's easier to refer to them as the core four than to list them all separately. But when I showed this picture to my mentor, he said, so what are the dog breeds? I was like, what do you mean? Nick is a German Shepherd. Tori and Apache are a Belgian Malinois, and Gigi is a Corgi. And then he replied, no, they're all different dog breeds. And at first I didn't understand what he meant. And the confusion triggered self-doubt because I'm thinking, why am I not hearing this? Why does he have to tell me this? The ego gets involved. And I had to clear some energy around it. You know, our negativity, our trauma, our belief systems act as a layering system that covers up our light and our ability to connect to the higher dimension. So this experience that he lit up for me by challenging my channel was to show me that I had some layers I needed to heal and eliminate in order to have a clearer channel even than what I already had. So this process was pivotal for me. And I did finally, after going through another energetic shift and clearing some energy, I did finally get the answer to his question. And I also realized finally that I wasn't really dealing with my personal dogs. I was actually dealing with the canine spirit guides, and my personal dogs were trying to show me how they worked. They were offering themselves as a vehicle through which the canine spirit guides were connecting to me through them. So as I continued meditating and connecting with these canine spirit guides energetically, I was beginning to understand a little bit better as to what I was dealing with and what this big picture was going to be looking like, or what it was going to end up being. So Anthea shared with me, she's the first guide that came through, and she was working with Tori and Trixie and Sally. And when I asked more questions, really started to spend time with her, she shared with me that she associates with the Golden Retriever dog breed. And she's also the one that associates with the cheetah. She's the first dog at the top there, Anthea. She's the first guide in the book. So I answered that question. And then I worked with Oscar, who was the second guide. And by the way, I didn't have their names yet at this point. I just was working with what I had. And so I asked him what his dog breed was, and he shared with me the black and tan coonhound, which I don't know anything about that breed. I had to look it up. And he's also the one that pairs with the lion. So he's below Anthea over here in this image. And then later through this process, because I only worked with one guide at a time, so I didn't ask all of their names right up front. But as I worked with the next two guides, I requested their names. So Oregon, who's associated, who is the guide that worked with Apache, the one that turned into the Black Panther, she associates with the Basenji dog breed. And so she's on the cover of the book here. And she's also in this picture up here in the left corner. And the final guide is a lot different than the first three. He has 3 names, and I have a story about that. But We'll call him Eric for now, and he associates with the pug dog breed, and he also associates with the bald eagle in association in cooperation with the pug. So this is becoming a much more complex system than I ever anticipated, right? I just thought I was talking to my dogs. Here I'm talking to these really organized beings with specific healing frequencies for humanity. And to assume at this point that I was a little bit overwhelmed with all of this would be an understatement. I knew nothing about channeling. I knew nothing about meditation. It's not like I was researching all of this, trying to figure out how to do it when it just fell in my lap. So I became really overwhelmed with this new job I had agreed to. It was hard to kind of keep my head above water because it was coming in really, really fast. But I didn't really want to stop and try and analyze it or think about it because then that brings your focus into your mind. And when you're trying to learn how to channel and deal with frequency, that's the last place you want your focus. So I didn't question it because I just wanted to experience it and I wanted to stay in my heart. And that's really the only way you're going to get that type of connection to energy and frequency is to stay in the heart. The moment your ego takes over and starts to question everything, it's too late. You're not there anymore. The magic is over. So I just allowed this process. I trusted it. And I knew because I had a mentor guiding me through it that I was completely safe. And he was validating everything that I was able to bring forward and to discover. And he was just guiding me a little bit. He wasn't able to give me answers. He was just guiding me and reinforcing where I needed to be, where I needed to shift, so to speak. And this book was also showing and demonstrating to me, revealing just how profound the spiritual connection is between us and our dogs. I mean, this is extraordinary that our dogs are offering this conduit between us and these incredibly powerful, benevolent beings that wish to support humanity and assist us in healing and elevating our frequency and expanding our consciousness. It's extraordinary. Okay, we're going to take a really quick break here. And when we come back, I'm going to give you some more gritty details about how I got their names, what job titles they all have, and what's the meaning behind their images, the conjoined images, and also the frequency of the book. So stay right there. We'll be right back.
Canine Spirit Guides, The Healing Power of Man's Best Friend by Leigh Strom. We've always suspected dogs are magical angels from God. In this groundbreaking book, you'll discover the specific divine gifts our canine companions really possess as they facilitate our healing, elevate our awareness, and expand our consciousness. Man's best friend has their own spirit guides, which is why they appear in our lives just when we need them most. This award-winning book, Canine Spirit Guides, The Healing Power of Man's Best Friend by Leigh Strom, is available on Amazon.com and heatherleystrom.com. Get your copy today and begin your journey.
Okay, you guys, now we're going to go into some really fun topics about how I channeled their names through. For me, the names were probably the most challenging part for me to decipher because I have a really limited experience with language. I only speak English. And now I'm realizing that that's probably not a good idea. Maybe I should have paid more attention in school and actually remembered all the Spanish I learned, or maybe tried some other languages in addition to, just to broaden my physical skill as well as my mental skill for wrapping my brain around other languages. My tongue really struggles to form the sounds that these canine spirit guides want me to use for their names. So I found that to be a big hindrance for me. So let me give you an example. So Oregon, when her name came through, and she's, well, I'll tell you the story first. I kept spelling it as Oregon, Oregon, like the state. And I remember thinking, well, this name doesn't sound very special or powerful. Anthea is different. Oscar is different. Oregon just didn't have that, spirit guide ring to it, I guess. So I started asking her for more clarity. Are you sure this is right? Do I have this right? Because it doesn't feel right. And this is the first time that I actually heard her voice speaking to me. And her voice was really soft, delicate, airy. It was kind of like what I would imagine like maybe a divine goddess would sound like. Effortless and weightless. And she told me that Oregon, the way I had written it on my paper, the reason it felt like it wasn't right, she says, that's because you are spelling it incorrectly. And then she showed me how to spell it, and she likes it spelled Oeragon. So that made a little more sense to me. And then she explained that in her language, Oregon means source. So then I felt a little bit embarrassed, but also humbled. And it was a really good lesson for me in not being so quick to judge, right? Now, Eric's name was really difficult. When his name came through, and he was the last one to come through because he's number 4 of the core 4, I could hear a bunch of rolling sounds that I couldn't replicate. That sound. And it was almost like I was receiving multiple layers of sound at the same time, which I just I couldn't get my mouth to cooperate. And I did manage to record it pretty well on my phone so that at least I knew how it was supposed to sound. But then came the challenge of trying to spell it, trying to put it on paper. His full name, he's the only one who has 3 names. And this also was a challenge for me to understand as well, because all the other guides at this point, up to this point, only had 1 name. Eric is a little bit different. His frequency is completely different than the other 3, and so is his job. So in order to fully represent his frequency, the name has to have a certain frequency. So the name he gave me was Daman Yararan Eric. And I don't even roll it properly. So if it was spoken properly, it would sound really elegant. And then I had to get someone to help me spell it, because then I'm like, how in the heck am I going to spell this? I have no idea how to even begin with all these sounds. So I had my astrologer, who's American, who now lives in London, and she apparently speaks many languages on top of that. She was able to help me put the words together on paper. So thankfully, I had her assistance. So that was really the hardest part for me, I'd say, is getting the names correctly. Now, another thing I want to share with you is that this book didn't come out all at once. I channeled each piece one at a time. So I worked with Anthea and her 3 dogs, wrote what she shared with me, what she instructed me to write. I had to take a lot of it out because it ended up being like a 1,000-page book. So I had to just keep the core part of it, the core 4. So I wrote her part, and then I put that aside. And then I wrote the second part, which was um, Oscar with Nick and Zozo. And I wrote down, all of my memories that needed to be included because they were part of the teaching, and got that all on paper, channeled in what Oscar wanted me to share about all of those stories, got done with that section, put it aside, did the same thing with Oregon, put it aside, did the same thing with Eric, put it aside. I had no idea what the big picture was going to look like. So it was as much a surprise to me when I put the whole book together as it was to you as you're reading it, basically. So after I got done writing all these sections, I sat down with the book and I started reading them. And one thing that really surprised me was that as I was reviewing it, it was imperative that I read it out loud because I had to listen to the rhythm and the tempo of the words, because that was important. That represented a frequency. So as I was reading it, if the tempo wasn't quite right, I had to reconstruct certain parts of it, maybe choose different words or reorganize the words maybe to get the rhythm just right, because this book is a frequency. So the frequency had to be completely correct before this book went to print. So that fascinated me because I didn't see that coming either. And the other thing that's important for you to know is that when I was writing this book, I was using words that I was not familiar with. They were not vocabulary words that I typically use. If it weren't for Google and me being able to say, "Hey, Google, how do you spell this word?" I mean, thankfully the guides were giving me the words, and so I could just speak it into the phone and get Google to show me what the word was, how to spell it, what it meant. And then I'd go, wow, that really fits the context. That's incredible. So I was broadening my vocabulary while I was writing this book, which was an added gift I didn't see coming as well. Now, also, as I sat there and I was reviewing the book, I noticed that Anthea and Oscar worked very differently than the other two guides. And so I started asking questions about this because they seem to focus on the childhood trauma. They seem to focus on the really deep human trauma, and pain and the parts of us that we don't want to see. And I started asking, so what is it? Because the same types of issues would come up, and it was almost like a pattern. And so I asked him, how do I address this? Is there a category to put this into? How do I deal with this? And they explained to me that they work through what they call tags. Now, a tag, there's many different words for this definition, but they chose tag. So it might be familiar to you, but what they explained is that a tag is an energetic beacon or a flare that resides within your energy field. And they are attracted, or they actually attract, the tags will attract lessons that we need to learn so that we can heal our soul trauma. And once the lesson is integrated and healed, then that tag is removed and it will no longer attract those types of repetitive cycles in your life, whether it's unhealthy relationships, toxic patterns, or destructive beliefs. Those will no longer manifest in your life. They won't be attracted to you anymore because the tag is a symbol of something that needs to be healed. So it's trying to get your attention, basically. And I kind of knew this on a general spiritual level, that this is why certain things kept happening to certain people, but they really nailed it down for me in writing this book when they explained that. So for an example, Think of how someone might repeatedly fall in love with partners who lie to them or mistreat them. When that tag is healed and no longer present in your energetic field, the tag that's associated with that wound, then your energy field now will align with a partner who is supportive, kind, and respectful. So you're not going to get those, you're not going to be attracted to the people anymore that wanted to deceive you and hurt you and lie to you. Instead, you're going to be attracted to the people who you wanted to be in a relationship with, but you never could make it happen, right? It'll just be natural because the tag is no longer present. If that makes sense. So Anthea and Oscar both work with tags, which is why they're really different than Oregon and Eric. Now, they also, after I finished writing the book, they also revealed that they each have a specific title, a specific purpose, and why they're assisting humanity or how they're assisting humanity. And I thought that was fascinating too, because more and more they're just revealing how organized they are, how specific they are. And by the way, there's over 50 of these canine guides I'm hearing, so there's going to be a lot more to come forward. But Anthea revealed that she's the guardian of the divine feminine, and she works in restoring self-love and joy. And that's obvious in my books of how she worked with me through those three dogs, Tori, Sally, and Trixie. And Oscar, his title is the guardian of divine masculine, helping us to reclaim our voice, our power, and our courage. And again, that's really obvious in the stories that he had me put in that book, where Nick and Zozo were assisting me. Now, Oregon is a little bit different than the first two, and she is the guardian of sovereign transformation. She removes masks and blocks, enabling the transition from cocoon into sovereign butterfly. She's really spectacular to work with. And again, that was really obvious in the book with my stories of how Apache was working with me. And then we have Eric, who is the guardian of past life integration. So he will reveal your intergalactic self and your connection to your past lives when you're ready. So there's a specific order that they work in. We have to get the base layers out of the way before we can elevate to another energetic level and work with Oregon, get another layer out of the way, the masks and the shields. And then when we're ready, Eric comes forward and he works to help integrate any other pieces of you, not from this lifetime. They could be another lifetime here on Earth. They could be another lifetime intergalactically. He helps you make that transition to understanding and connecting to your intergalactic self, which is really powerful for the clients of mine that have worked with him. It's pivotal for them. And I know in my journey, this book was written in 6 months. There is no way I could have gone through this type of transformation and jumped from not knowing anything to being a proficient practitioner in the quantum field without Eric, without his assistance. So he's an incredible team member. Now, there was another question I had for them about the images that they had me construct, because, they have this split image, the conjoined image of the dog breed and the shamanic animal. And when I was sitting here looking at the images, I'm like, what is it about this image? It's obvious that there's something very important about these images because they just really capture your attention. And they shared with me why the images were necessary and what they meant. And you can see these images in the book itself, or you can go to my website for the book to see the images in color. And that's Canine, letter K, number 9, spiritguides.com. You can see all their images there and read more about the canine guides on that page. But when I asked them about these images, they described every detail of their own image and how it connected to their purpose and their frequency. And I added this content to the book, and it just gives me chills when I read it because it's so accurate and there's so much frequency in their own descriptions of their image that it's impactful. So go back and look at that. If you read the book, you didn't really pay attention to it, be sure you focus on their description of the image and actually look at the image as you're reading it, because there's a lot of frequency there and it will help you connect with that part of yourself. It will also help you learn to connect with that specific canine spirit guide itself. And, initially when I started writing this book, I was in a totally different place than I am now. And this impacts our ability to receive information. So when I put this book together, I said, so what does the split image mean? And what does the dog versus the wild animal mean? And initially they said, okay, just tell people that the dog is a angel version and the shamanic animal is a spirit guide version. That'll suffice for now. Just tell them that. So that's what I put in the book. But that didn't quite sit right with me. Like, even speaking it felt really clumsy in my mouth. So I knew there had to be something else there, something that I needed to know more about. And so for the last 2 years, because it's been 2 years since the book was published, I've continued to ask, tell me more about this. I don't think that's quite right. That's not the whole story. So finally, I get to a point energetically where I can hold this information. And I was out riding my mountain bike in the Red Rock Canyon, just like I normally do in the summers. And I started to get this massive download. And part of that download was the information about the image that I had been requesting. So this download was really important and eye-opening. So I stopped my ride and I actually recorded a video explaining the download, sharing the download, mostly just so I could remember it by the time I got home. But what they shared was that the canine aspect of their image represents powerful intergalactic frequency, a bridge to higher dimensions and advanced energies, advanced healing technologies that have never been contained on Earth in the past. And the reason they have to collaborate with the shamanic animal is because the shamanic animal frequency is an established Earth frequency already. So this is a grounding force necessary to anchor in and to integrate these advanced intergalactic frequencies into our physical world. So the shamanic animal acts as a container for the frequency that's coming in from the canine dog breed frequency. So they need to be together for now in order to help anchor in this new energetic technology that's coming through with these canine spirit guides. Now that resonated with me. That made sense based on everything I experienced, as well as everything that my clients are experiencing in their sessions with the canine spirit guides. And that's earth shattering, if you ask me. Absolutely phenomenal information that's coming through. Now, one thing I want you to understand and be very clear on is that this work that I'm doing with the canine spirit guides is not static. It's in constant evolution and it's constantly growing and expanding. And the more I do within myself, the more frequency I can hold and channel. With each level of growth I experience, I can access deeper understanding, higher wisdom, and even more of their powerful energy. And this is precisely why personal growth, healing, needs to be a lifestyle. It's not a destination. You don't do one part of it and stop. The work is never done, but it does get easier as you go along. So keep that in mind. And what's truly remarkable is observing how they work within myself and also with my clients. It has become clear that possibilities we once thought impossible for humanity are not only real, but easily within reach. So now, with that long, drawn out picture I've provided you of how this book came to be, you might have a more clear understanding of why this book is so important, how it might assist you on your own spiritual journey, and why I continue to update the information from this book and from my experiences with the canine guides on my many media outlets. So check this book out for yourself. Canine Spirit Guides, The Healing Power of Man's Best Friend, and see what this story, what this journey, and what this frequency has to offer you. I hope that you've enjoyed digging into the frequencies of my book, Canine Spirit Guides. Thank you so much for being here. Now, if you're enjoying my show, be sure to add it to your favorites and share it with your friends. And then come back each week for a new episode with a compelling guest or maybe downloaded frequency from a canine spirit guide. If you're looking for more, check out my webpage, heatherleighstrom.com. That's Heather, LEIGHSTROM.com, where you can find more information on my one-to-one sessions, my life-changing programs, memberships, and events. I'm Heather Leigh Strom. Don't forget to elevate your frequency and transform your reality. Be your best out there. Love ya.